The Confederations Cup had 40,000 South Africans applying for the volunteer position, of which 4,000 volunteers were chosen. These chosen volunteers had a lot to do with the major success of this event.
Well, I think Blatter said is giving us 7.5. If that is an average, I think the volunteers certainly should get 8 and more. They've done a wonderful job. So everyone leaving at the end of the Confederations Cup talked about the people of South Africa. It's very strange, they didn't talk about the organization, they talked about the people that they met, that they engaged with. And essentially all over the places you saw, you did not have one functional area without volunteers. The media was very happy and they were serviced by the media volunteers, the marketing, transportation, you saw the volunteers there, logistics, the protocol, the hospitality, all of the areas, the arrival at the airport, the information that they got from the volunteers. And the volunteers, of course, are people who want to serve in the first place. But secondly, they can indicate their choice. If you have a marketing interest, this is an opportunity to work with some of the leading brands in the world, to work with the captains of industry, to work with the big bosses of Coca-Cola and the ordinary workers. If you want to work in the IT&T environment, well, you're going to work with the best IT&T companies in the world. And so in different areas, it's an opportunity for exposure, where that experience and exposure is valued much more than the stipend that people receive. And I think that for South Africans, and this is a country where people said, well, you know, South Africa does not have a culture of volunteerism. We have just celebrated the birthday of probably the biggest volunteer in the world, Nelson Mandela, who was, worked as a volunteer for 67 years with no pay, no reward. And that's why he asked us for every year that he volunteered 67 years, you must volunteer for 1 minute. That's 67 minutes. But very clearly, what has been established, one, there's a very strong sense of patriotism and volunteer spirit in this country. And two, that people did and went around with their business with pride, with feeling a sense and a need to contribute to the success of this World Cup.
Recently, the 2010 FIFA World Cup volunteer program opened. 15,000 volunteers will be required for the 2010 FIFA World Cup. Volunteers play a vital role as they are the public face of the tournament.
Volunteers are a very important part of implementing a World Cup. You will understand that the local organizing committee would appoint maybe about 500 people. But because this is a huge event that happens over 9 cities, 10 stadiums, no amount of those people can only do it on their own. So the volunteers really become the support in making sure that the implementation indeed is successful and it happens.
There are 16 functional areas for applicants to choose from. During the application process, the applicant can choose which area best suits their skill set. The functional areas range from accreditation, administration, marketing, ticketing and media, just to mention a few. Training will be done for the different functional areas.
Volunteers would get contextual understanding of the event, the organizations that are responsible for the event, but most of all, they will understand what exactly is expected of them. They would get a job training that will teach them what is expected in terms of being a media volunteer, in terms of being a spectator services, accreditation, etc. That is a very important part of the event, but will also make sure that all volunteers, they have a contextual understanding of the country, of the host nation, so that as they come across a lot of different people that come from different parts of the world, are able to tell them a history of South Africa, important official symbols of the country, and generally where we're coming from.
We had a 3-day workshop at the Tshwane Event Center, where we were trained on our functional areas. We were taught what we didn't know about our country as well. We were taught all the different functional areas and what would be required of us.
The organising committee is expecting around 100,000 applications, of which they'll only have to choose 15,000 volunteers.
We're still going to have long nights and long days, but indeed we have to go through that. What I've just told you now is that a volunteer has an opportunity to choose which functional area they would look at. So we look at the skill level of the person and the education, and we look at the profile in terms of does it fit, what they're doing. Experience also becomes important. Just as we have had a Confederations Cup in South Africa, we've got volunteers that have participated. That would also be another assistance. Experience than to have to teach new people all over again. We do a lot of professional, firstly, profiling of the individual in terms of the levels of skill, the education, the knowledge, the experience. We also do security checking, which becomes very important in terms of making sure that you eliminate any risks that can come through volunteers. So we do both profiling of the individual skill-wise, and we also do security checking.
The job of a volunteer is a lot of work with long hours, but Nanaki assured us that there are certain perks in being a volunteer.
For me, the best one was getting to see the whole Brazilian team coming off the bus right in front of me and saying hi to each one of them. You know, and meeting different people, meeting everyone from media. You meet different people from walks of life, and you get to know what it's all about, you know. You get to know what the media, what the world, and what people out there are saying about South Africa.
For those who volunteered in the Confederations Cup, well, I know they want to be in the World Cup also. It's a little bit about like the Bafana team, you know. The team is qualified for the World Cup, played well in the Confederations Cup, and now the team say, man, just keep the team intact. Don't make any changes. But we don't know. People still say perhaps Bafana needs a striker, perhaps we must tinker here and there. So perhaps around the volunteer team as well. They worked incredibly well as a team. And when we went around to thank them, the spirit has just been incredible.